Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Thursday, May 19th, 2022. Buffalo's Masten neighborhoods across the country that has limited access to grocery stores selling fresh goods at an affordable price. Now that the Top supermarket, which opened in 2003, has temporarily closed in the aftermath of the racist and murderous shooting, it poses new challenges for residents, many of whom walk or rely on public transportation and who now must find alternate food stores that are further away and more difficult to access. We discussed that and more this morning with James Wright of the Washington Informer, and joining us also is the CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to see both of you. But before we get started, before we get into it, it's with great sadness that we note that one of our colleagues at the Challenger Community News in Buffalo, Catherine Massey, was one of the fatal victims of the racist and murderous shooting at Top Supermarket. The National Newspaper Publishers Association has two member newspapers in that area, the Challenger and the Buffalo Criterion. Reportedly, the last column Massey wrote was about gun violence. Our hearts go out to the family of Catherine Massey, her family, of course, our NNPA family in Buffalo, and all the victims and their families of this unconscionable and premeditated murder. We remember Catherine Massey. Dr. Chavis, I know you have some words on that.
On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, our entire executive committee, our entire board of directors, and I can speak on behalf of all 230 African-American owned newspapers who are members of the NNPA. Our hearts, our profound condolences goes out to the family of Sister Massey. And we pray especially to the Buffalo Challenger. It's one of our oldest newspapers in that part of New York. And the Buffalo Challenger, our hearts are with you. We stand with you. In fact, we have people on the way to Buffalo now, and we're going to highlight what happened there in Buffalo, particularly with the Buffalo Challenger, Stacy and Jim, at our convention. This is our heart right now. We send our condolences, but beyond our condolences, we have to send our support. And we have to do things to let that community know, to let that newspaper know, to let Black people in Buffalo know that the Black press of America, we stand with you resolutely, and we stand with all the victims of this racist, white supremacist violence and murders that take place too often now in our communities across America. But right now, our focus is on Buffalo.
Absolutely. And staying in Buffalo, James, Tops was the only accessible supermarket on the east side of Main Street where more than 80% of the residents are Black, and the median household income is less than $20,000. Situated along with other segregated areas across the country, Buffalo has the label of the Mississippi of the North because of its history of racist redlining and restrictive covenants that prevented Black home ownership and led to segregated neighborhood schools. According to a 2018 report by the Partnership for the Public Good, Buffalo's Black residents are 6 times more likely than white residents to live in a community that does not have a grocery store. The report also found that in the Buffalo-Niagara region, only 10% of Black residents live in areas with opportunity, which includes access to healthy food, compared to more than 60% of white people who have such access. And just to note, the term food desert, as many of us know, emerged in the 1970s, but in the past decade, it has really caught on and is now a common concept in economic and public health fields. James, this is tragic. And now they don't have a supermarket, at least temporarily, and food deserts are everywhere. I know there's some in D.C.
Yes. Let me just say this about Buffalo. Buffalo is a place I'm somewhat familiar with, even though I've never been there, because my former late mentor, Frances Murphy, taught at Buffalo State College. And by the way, one of the students that she taught was a young man by the name of Byron Brown, who is the mayor of Buffalo. And Byron Brown is doing an outstanding job as the mayor of that city. in 2006. It's very tough to be mayor of that city. Buffalo, strangely enough to me, to people like me, Stacey, is one of the most segregated cities in America. You have the east side, which is predominantly black, and the other side, which is predominantly non-black. And the fact that you only have one grocery store for that east side, that is just unconscionable. And the fact of the matter is that more has to be done in order to provide for those residents. You talked about the poverty. That is a city that has a lot of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like there's no real emphasis on the part of policymakers in Buffalo, the mayor accepting, of course, to see that this food desert is cured. Maybe this is what is needed in order to get another grocery store in that area.
Well, Dr. Chavis, when comparing communities with similar poverty rates, Black and Latino neighborhoods tend to have fewer supermarkets that offer a variety of produce and healthy foods, and have more small retails like convenience stores and liquor stores that have fewer produce options than in predominantly white neighborhoods. And that's even in white neighborhoods that are not prosperous, not wealthy. And I think you're on mute again, Dr. Chavis.
Thank you. Absolutely. But these food deserts also, I think, presents an opportunity for African-American entrepreneurs. We need to go into our own. We used to have our own grocery stores.
Right.
And I think sometimes now we depend on these big chains. I think that given the population, there are more Black people in that zip code in Buffalo, the highest concentration of Blacks in the state of New York. We should have our own grocery stores, our own businesses. And I think while, yes, I'm sure a national chain is going to move in because of the publicity, but I do think at some point we have to talk about how do we provide our communities not only the grocery stores that we need, the healthcare that we need, the schools that we need. Those are the things that we have to advocate in the Black press of America. While we point to the problem, we also have to point to the solution. And I think one of the solutions to these food deserts, James and Stacey, is for us to gather our resources, gather our entrepreneurs together, even some of our churches, not only build housing, they can build grocery stores. I know Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem owned the largest supermarket in Harlem at one time. So I just think that we got to come up with some solutions to these deserts, not only food deserts, but healthcare deserts.
Yeah.
And certainly, right now, our communities are being targeted for racist violence. Our communities are being targeted for the depletion of what would need to have not only health care, but food care, if I could use that term, food care. I think that we need all of these to be approached from a perspective of self-determination. If I learned anything looking at the 195 years of the Black press of America, to the extent to which we own what we deliver is the extent to which we can help improve the quality of life of our communities.
Yeah, David Youngblood says that $1 from every Black person in America will provide the leverage to do much in our community. And you tend to agree with that, Dr. Chavis and James. Also, we talked about the prevalence of liquor stores and dollar stores. That's been a long-standing problem. The liquor stores in the community placed there for obvious nefarious reasons, right? And we know it's placed there. It doesn't mean we have to utilize it. And as Doc said, James, I want your further thoughts on this too. Entrepreneurship. The young ones, especially today, are reaching out as entrepreneurs. They don't want to work for anybody. They want to be the boss.
And you're certainly correct about that. And that is a very positive development in terms of our race. And for many years, and Stacey, I don't want to date you and me, but remember when we were growing up, the thing was to get a job and work for somebody else. And now we're beginning to see that we need to start a business and work for yourself. And that would really help a community such as Buffalo. You do have the Buffalo Bills there. And then you do have Black people who play for the Buffalo Bills. that would be an excellent chance for them to pool their money together to build a supermarket and to support businesses that would support that supermarket. Also, keep in mind, Buffalo needs to really upgrade its transportation system on the east side of that city. A lot of people have to walk in order to get to even that supermarket. And now they set up this ad hoc bus system, but they've got to improve transportation in order for people to get there. So we need to support these businesses. And we need to have the transportation infrastructure to support Black people in terms of what they need to do.
And we're talking about folks who are making less than I mean, when I saw those numbers, I had to read them 10 times, less than $20,000, and they have families. So maybe we need to start with this idea. The minimum wage is just too minimum, right? We Dr. Chavez, that's been a fight too among progressives to get that minimum wage hiked up, at least on the federal side, but also on the state side.
Well, absolutely. Well, I think on the House side, the Democrats have passed. They want the minimum wage. Just to be obstructionists of the Republicans on the Senate side that is preventing. They're trying to prevent health care. They're trying to prevent an answer to police brutality, the George Floyd Policing Act. They have helped suppress our vote and voter suppression. And I know a number of states now are having their primaries. And you're seeing the effect of voter suppression in these early primary states. So you're right. The minimum wage, Stacey and Jim, is another indicator of how overall there's almost 360 degrees of challenges that we face in every sector of the economy. But you know what? We can't let this break our spirit. We have to rise to the occasion and keep pushing forward. And no matter what the obstacles are, there's a way over or around or through those obstacles.
Yeah. Stacey, what is the minimum wage now? When I started working as a teenager 10 years ago, I'm being facetious, but actually it was about 30 or 40 years ago. It was $260. It was $265. That's when
you are dating yourself.
I am dating myself. Yes. What is it now?
Last I recall, and I'm gonna look for David Youngblood to help me out here. I believe the minimum wage right now is about $7.50. I believe.
Oh, you got to be kidding!
An hour. I could be wrong, but like I said, I'm going to lean on our fantastic David Youngblood for that. He says city officials provide the zoning permits to open liquor stores, but no grocery stores, and that's another thing, Dr. Chavis. They are providing these zoning permits for that.
Well, again, we need more African Americans on these zoning committees, on these planning committees. Most cities lay out their municipal expansion plan 5-10 years in advance.
Right.
We need to not only read those plans, we need to be involved in developing the plans in the first place. That's also where gentrification comes in. In a lot of the inner cities, our communities have been depleted, have been gentrified. And then other people come in, start new businesses and thrive, and the price of the property goes up after we lose the property.
Yeah, and James, by the way, I'm just did a quick research. So it depends on where you are. In North Carolina, it's $7.25 an hour. New York is $13.20 an hour. New Mexico, $11.50 an hour. It goes on. New Jersey, $13 an hour. Some states, there's a couple of states that do have $15 minimum wage. So there is a list here, but it's still not enough. I mean, they're fighting for a $15 minimum wage, but they're fighting for that, James and Dr. Chavis. If you look at the bills, it's over time, right? It's not immediate in some instances. They need it immediately. And look, at 15, it should be $25 an hour.
Truly. And that's what the problem is. The minimum wage, particularly when Ronald Reagan got into office, I don't think he signed any minimum wage increase during that decade. And I remember that because I was working at that time. And so I think Bill Clinton did, but there has been no progressive, as it should be, rise in the minimum wage. And keep in mind, it is African-American females of color that suffer from this when you have large companies like my favorite McDonald's use that in order to have their workers, employ their workers. This is outrageous.
Yeah, it is. And good morning to Bobby Henry of the West Side Gazette. It's always good to see Bobby. He says, how do we come out of the desert that we are being forced into? And Doc, you've spoken on that many a times. Obviously, Bobby is talking about this racism.
We have to change our deserts into oases. And our oasis is our Black-owned businesses. Our oasis is our having better schools, better hospitals, better healthcare facilities. Our oasis is when we look to ourselves rather than look to the sources of our oppression to provide our relief. And that's always been the message of the Black press of America. And we know that's exactly what the West Side Gazette does down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as well as all of our papers across the country. And as we prepare for our convention next month, June 22nd through 25th in New Orleans, this is on the agenda. How do we not just prepare in terms of reparations, but how do we plan, how do we strategize, how we develop, how do we retain some of the dollars that do flow, even at the minimum wage, to our community? It flows right back out. So that's another thing. No matter what the wages are, it's how we spend the wages and what develops or contributes to our own infrastructures. There's still a lot of resources out there that we have to tap into, and that's what we need to kind of gather together, plan together, and plan for success. And I remember what the sister said from UBS that was on an earlier program in the week. There is wealth building going on in our communities, but most of us don't even know about it. And I think that we have to not only connect these dots, but plan for our future. Something that Tapa Carew said when he spoke to the NEP a couple years ago. The future is in our hands, and how we use our hands to shape the future. Never put the future in the hands of those who would oppress us, who would disrespect us, or who would murder us. We need to have a better sense of shaping the future for our young people and for all generations, no matter what ages they are today in 2022.
Yeah, we'll give the last word on this topic to Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times. She says we need to be active as community residents to protest the opening of liquor and pawn stores when we are aware. Our Caucasian counterparts will protest such when they are aware of things contrary to a peaceful and prosperous community. Paris Brown with the comment of the morning. As we move on, guilty plea for officers in the George Floyd case. Thomas Lane, one of the 3 former Minneapolis police officers who stood by while Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd in 2020, has pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Lane expects to serve 2 years of a 3-year sentence based on a plea arrangement announced by Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Ellison, the former congressman, says, "I am pleased Thomas Lane has accepted responsibility for his role in Floyd's death. His acknowledgement that he did something wrong is an important step toward healing the wounds of the Floyd family, our community, and the nation. While accountability is not justice, this is a significant moment in this case and a necessary resolution on our continued journey to justice." Lane had faced at least 12 years behind bars if a state jury were to convict him of unintentional murder in his upcoming trial. Earlier this year, a federal jury convicted Lane and fellow former officers Tao Thao and J. Alexander Kung of violating Floyd's civil rights. The trio faced state charges of aiding and abetting murder and aiding and abetting manslaughter for their actions. Prosecutors and video of the deadly incident revealed that as Chauvin pressed his knee into George Floyd's neck for more than 9.5 minutes, Lane held down Floyd's legs while Kung also restrained Floyd. Thou stood and just watched, prosecutors have said. A judge set Lane's sentencing for September 21st. So this is significant in a lot of ways. One way, as Attorney General Keith Ellison says, it's accountability here, because now it sets the precedence, James and Dr. Chavis. Officers, you better beware, especially those in Minnesota, because Keith Ellison is the new sheriff in town. You're going to pay if you don't do something to prevent this type of behavior.
Absolutely. And we salute Keith Ellison. And I think not only as the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, but I think that it shows when you make a difference. Now, there's some other states that have black attorney generals who kind of missed the boat, calling out Kentucky,
Yeah.
calling out
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Yes.
So I think that it is significant, and the black press enjoins the statement of Attorney General Keith Ellison. But this is a warning to all police officers across the country. This is just not a Minnesota thing. There are implications both on the federal level and on the state level. And the officer pled guilty because he was guilty. I mean, nobody forced the officer to plead guilty. He pled guilty because he was guilty. And it was all in living color on video, that horror. And that horror still traumatizes many of our communities across the country who got a chance to see that video. And our brother crying out to his mama for his last breath before they took his life. And I think that, there's so many reminders in the history of our people of how much we've suffered, how much we have lost, but also our struggle is about what we're gaining, about and our determination, not only to stay alive, but to do better, to improve our quality of life. I'm going to point out to all the listeners, this is still 2022. We got to have a record black voter turnout. We got to bust up this black voter suppression, and we got to we need to take some people out of office as well as putting some people in office. That's what voter accountability is. But thank you, Stacey and James Wright, for continuing to keep the voice of the black press alive Monday through Friday. I think let it be known as a tremendous contribution to the articulation of the expression of perspectives from the black press, which is so vital at this time in 2022.
Well, and along those lines, James, speaking of elections, U.S. Senate candidates Sherry Beasley and Charles Booker came out victorious this week in their Democratic primary contests in North Carolina and Kentucky, respectively. The two historic candidates will go on to the general election in November. Sherry Beasley beat out a crowded Democratic primary in North Carolina to become the party's nominee for the U.S. Senate. If successful in November's general election, the former Chief Justice for the North Carolina Supreme Court would become the first black senator from the Tar Heel state. Beasley's election would also fill a current void after Vice President Kamala Harris's departure left the Senate without a black woman represented in its body. In Kentucky, U.S. Senate candidate Booker clinched the win with more than 70% of the vote. Both he and Beasley made history on Tuesday as the first African Americans to be nominated by the Democratic Party for a U.S. Senate seat in their respective states. Booker, a former Kentucky state rep, will go up against Republican U.S. Senator Rand Paul in November. He first ran for Senate in the 2020 primary election, but failed to clinch the nomination in his quest to unseat Mitch McConnell. So that's going to be a couple of races that are going to be closely watched. These two Democrats, black Democrats, Dr. Chavis and James, they're raising a lot of money and they're making a lot of noise. James, we'll start with you on that.
Yeah, and keep in mind that you have Val Demings running for the U.S. Senate in Florida, and she's looking better every day against Marco Rubio. And it would be an improvement in the U.S. Senate if she were to win, not only because she's an African-American female, but to get Marco Rubio out of there. And keep in mind that Sherry Beasley is not the first black person to get the Democratic nomination in North Carolina. You remember Harvey Gantt ran against Jesse Helms and ran a very credible campaign against Jesse Helms. But you want to talk about voter suppression, Dr. Chavis, I think there was a little bit of that when Jesse Helms was in the race. So this is a very exciting time. In Wisconsin, you have the lieutenant governor there who's running against Ron Johnson. And that's a no-brainer to me, considering who Senator Johnson, that's a no-brainer to me. So this is a very exciting time. But people, we got to get out and vote and put these folks in office.
That's right. Several days ago, I was sitting at the table with Senator Warnock, who's running for re-election in Georgia. And of course, the Republicans are running another African-American, Herschel Walker, against him. And of course, Trump supports Walker. But I believe that Senator Warnock will be victorious. the distinguished pastor of Ebenezer, the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, a great freedom fighter. And he's a mentee of John Lewis. And he was not only John Lewis's pastor, but John Lewis was his mentor. And I think that all of these states, Stacey and James, that have been laid out, that's why people say, well, do we have something to vote for? Absolutely, we got something to vote for. And what we have to vote for is our future. What we have to vote for is the preservation of our lives. What we have to vote for is to give our young people an opportunity to continue to be freedom fighters as we all fight for freedom, justice, and equality.
Yeah, Daniela Pierre says Rubio must go. Hey, James, how important we saw the efforts, the fruits of Stacey Abrams' labor back in 2020 and certainly in the 2021 runoff that got Warnock and Ossoff, and her race. She's got a rematch against Kemp there in Georgia for governor. How important? Now we see this. How important can you just really punctuate how important her work has been?
Her work has been phenomenal. And by the way, I believe she won in 2018. But putting that aside, I think that as the first African-American governor of Georgia and as the first female governor of Georgia and the first female African-American governor, period, would send a powerful signal throughout this country, because Georgia is such a powerful state economically, particularly in the South, but also all over. And so that will send a message. And the fact that she works with LaTosha Brown and Cliff Albright in terms of registering voters in Georgia. Now, it's one thing because it's easy to, I don't want to say easy, but in the Atlanta metropolitan area to get people registered to vote. But in the rural areas, this is where they really have worked in order to get Black people in rural areas to register to vote. That is where the strength is. That is what is phenomenal about what she is doing.
Well, we have just a few months. You can boil it down to even weeks to the midterm elections. Is going to be very interesting to see what happens. Dr. Chavis, before we close, of course, the NMPA's summer conference, 195 years of the Black press of America. I mean, when you say that, it's one thing, but think about that. 195 years of the Black press of America. That means that before the end of slavery, the Black press was started, and throughout Jim Crow, throughout the Civil Rights Movement, throughout it all, in this age of the police killings of Black, unarmed Black people, in this day and age of white supremacy, the Black press not only still exists, the Black press is thriving. Dr. Chavis, let us know, give us just an appetizer of what's on the table in New Orleans next month.
One of the most important national gatherings in the history of our people will be in New Orleans, June 22nd through the 25th. You can register for the convention by going to nmpa-events.com, and please register. The hotel is filling up. We're going to have one of our most spectacular conventions. The great, phenomenal woman, leader, singer, freedom fighter, Stephanie Mills, is going to not only perform, but she's going to address the importance of the Black press. We have publishers from the East Coast, the West Coast, the North and the South who've already registered. And it's open to the public. I want everybody to feel that the Black press is the voice of our communities. We represent all of our voices, and there's a diversity in our community. And so you're going to see young people at our convention. We have a focus on millennials and Generation Z, but you're also going to see some of the elders of the movement, some of the elders of the Black press, and some of the innovators. We're going to be talking about wealth building. We're going to be talking about equity. We're going to be talking about how to get that vote out that we've just talked about across America. So it's a vibrant time. It's a resilient time. And in one sense, on the one hand, we have to mourn all of our losses and prepare to rededicate ourselves to keep the legacies of our community, of our struggle for freedom alive. But on the other hand, we have to fight to open up new doors, new vistas of opportunity for our people. And that's what's going to take place in New Orleans in June. James Wright will be there. You'll be there, Stacey. And we're looking for all of our listeners to come on down to New Orleans to join us at our national convention.
Well, look out, New Orleans. James is coming. My goodness. But most importantly, the Black press is coming. Thanks for joining. Let it be known. We will see you tomorrow.